Mr. President, I come to Florida today to express my strong, very strong support for Israel. On October the 7th, Israel was suddenly and deliberately attacked by a group of terrorists. Now, they didn't attack military institutions, they attacked citizens in Israel. It's been described by some as Israel's 9/11 or Israel's Pearl Harbor. They killed women and children. They filmed themselves, and they broadcast it on the internet. They were proud. They were very proud of what they were doing. They killed more than 1,400 innocent people. This includes more than 30 Americans. Sometimes that's forgotten by our mainstream media. This is the largest terrorist killing of Americans since 9/11. More than 100 people are still hostage by Hamas, and this also includes Americans. So we need to do two things. First, we need to get the hostages out. That's very, very important. It's been too long. Then we need to ensure that this never happens again. You know, Israel can do both of these things. Israel has a very highly advanced military and a highly advanced economy. The only way to ensure that Hamas cannot ever attack again, as Israel says, is to wipe them from the face of the earth. This is Israel's mission, and we hear this from their leaders every day. The role of the United States in this conflict should be to support and supply. So let's first talk about support. Over the last 2 weeks, we've seen left-wing protests against Israel and support of Hamas. It's hard to believe, but it's very, very, very true. We've seen them overseas in London and in Sydney, but we've also seen them here in the United States on college campuses. You know, to me, that's absolutely disgusting. I'll just mention a few examples. Students at Harvard, mind you, defended Hamas of what they did. Next, they'll be complaining about not being able to get jobs. I wonder why they won't be able to get jobs, especially on places like Wall Street. Students at the University of California, Long Beach, handed out flyers with pictures of Hamas. The list goes on, but this tells us a lot about the state of our education in this country. I was involved in education for 40 years. I can understand it. These kids don't know the first thing about the Middle East or about foreign policy. A lot are not taught this. But they have been marinated in woke ideology since grade school at a lot of our public schools. Left-wing groups are siding with terrorists because of this. Today, there are protests happening here at the Capitol, right here on Capitol Hill. The appropriations hearings with Secretary Austin and Secretary Blinken have been repeatedly, every few minutes, interrupted by left-wing, pro-Hamas protesters. Pro-Hamas leftists shut down a building in the House just a couple of weeks ago. Shut it down. Now they want to shut down the Appropriations Committee. Many of these groups are funded by Democrat dark money groups. These left-wing groups are calling for a ceasefire over in Gaza. This is like calling for a ceasefire after Pearl Harbor, as some of the leaders in Israel have said. To me, a ceasefire is a surrender. A ceasefire means Hamas gets to kill civilians without any consequences after what they did on October the 7th. Every single Democrat in the Senate needs to condemn these left-wing groups. Everybody. We all need to condemn these groups. The left is making excuses for these terrorists. It's immoral and it's un-American of what's going on across our country and with these protests. We need to ensure that terrorists never, ever attack anybody like this again. This requires, again, wiping off Hamas from the map. And as you listen to the Israeli leaders, that's exactly what they plan to do. Israel's going to be able to do this. They're going to be able to do it themselves. They're not going to need our help, but they will need supplies. We need to ensure that they have what they need to wipe Hamas off from existence. I support sending Israel more weapons if they need them. But unfortunately, there's already an effort to tie Israel funding to Ukraine funding right here in this building. President Biden sent over a request for a supplemental funding bill just this past weekend. It includes $14 billion for Israel, but it also includes $60 billion for Ukraine. That's $230 million a day. That's 4 times as much for Ukraine than it is for Israel. The war in Ukraine has nothing to do with the war in Israel. Israel is our #1 ally. Sometimes people forget that. Ukraine is not our #1 ally. They're not even in NATO. The war in Israel is about killing terrorists who want to kill not only people in countries like Israel, but also Americans. There's no reason Ukraine and Israel aid need to be in the same bill. I'm against that. I'm for funding Israel, first and foremost. So we need to vote on them separately. We ought to support Israel, and we need to supply Israel. We need to stand with them as they take on the terrorists. It's going to be a very, very tough and grueling job, but we support them.